All right, good morning, everyone. My name is William Burg. I'm president of the board of the directors of Preservation Sacramento. I'd like to thank you all for attending and welcome you to the May 2021 Preservation Roundtable. This is our quarterly membership meeting and public event where we talk about upcoming and current historic preservation issues, local history, and heritage tourism, and new development projects that take place in historic districts. And I'd like to start off. It was essentially what we did last time that I'd like to continue doing is recognizing that the city of Sacramento and thus the area where Preservation Sacramento operates was traditionally and is the land of the Nisenan, who were here for thousands of years and who shaped the land that we're sitting on. And so I do want to start with that recognition. We generally talk more about the 19th and 20th century and 21st century buildings of our modern city, but part of historic preservation is recognizing that we, in a sense, live in all times, not just our own. So the first item on our agenda is updates from Preservation Sacramento, talking about our current projects. And obviously, with things the way they are, the projects we're working on have been very much drawn back and limited. We're still very involved in our advocacy role, but in terms of outdoor events, public events, we've scaled back. And even though things are starting to open up now, the home tour, for example, starts planning 9 months in advance. So we are still working on a virtual home tour. And then as things reopen, we feel like it's safer, we will start doing more public in-person event, probably outdoors for starters, and who knows. But you can see our agenda today includes the Richmond Grove survey, which we'll talk about next. Sean deCourcy will be talking about the city of Sacramento's preservation department updates, including the retirement of our preservation director, Carson Anderson. A new project that is located in the Mansion Flats Historic District by Urban Capital. Stephen Ropp will be joining us around 11 o'clock to talk about Repurposed Salvage. This is, if you're familiar with places that do deconstruction and sell salvaged and reclaimed lumber and architectural pieces, that's what this is about. John Haeber from CPF will talk about the California Preservation Conference, and then Dane and Susan Heenis will be joining us later to talk about the progress of the Eichler Historic District in Southland Park, and we'll finish up with a little commercial spot for our upcoming members-only virtual tour and updates about the historic home tour. So Richmond Grove, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is the neighborhood generally between Southside Park and Poverty Ridge, south of R Street. And the biggest project we'll be doing this year is a historic district and landmark survey of that neighborhood. This is a rough outline of what's being surveyed, and it's kind of has a strange shape because, like many downtown neighborhoods, there were big geographic things that took place that changed, in some cases, the borders of neighborhoods, or because we already have a number of historic districts, some places that don't need to be surveyed because they're covered already. But as you can see, generally the survey area is between 12th and 19th Street, from S Street to W Street, but because Interstate 50, Highway 50, went through this neighborhood, we're also including a small portion of X Street south of the freeway. And the part of the intent is to look at whether or not any of those areas are potentially eligible either as individual landmarks or as small historic districts in their own right. And the idea is not to create a single historic district necessarily, but to find out if there are sufficient concentrations of historic buildings to justify the creation of districts or identification of individual landmarks. This map shows the nearby historic districts, and you can see the Southside Park Historic District has this long tail. I'll see if I can put a pointer on it. that extends down T Street, the old streetcar line. So any place that's in yellow here doesn't need to be surveyed. So we're going to be surveying outside of that boundary. And you can see on the other ends, the railroad tracks create a physical barrier where there's a change in buildings, and the other side of it is the Poverty Ridge Historic District. And in the north, there's several other historic districts. To zoom out a little bit, let's take a look at the city's historic districts. You can see that there are several of them. There's about 30 in the central city, as well as Oak Park and the Historic City Cemetery. But there are a couple of gaps in this map. And there's over here around Capitol Mall and the state capitol and downtown. In many cases, there's no historic districts because there really aren't any eligible buildings, or weren't when these districts were first created, initially from the 70s through the 90s and the early 2000s. There is no historic district in the upper right-hand corner. But there are potentially eligible buildings. But the neighborhood in the upper right-hand corner has a relatively high percentage of home ownership and a very active neighborhood association with a lot of strength. And so I think that we want to, as an organization, we try to respond to community concerns, and we've had far more concern about Richmond Grove from people who live in the neighborhood and from our own perspective. And it is really the last quarter of the central city that has a high concentration of eligible historic buildings. It's mostly older buildings, a relatively low percentage of home ownership, less than 20%, and is within the path, especially recently, of development. It's also within the path of some of the changes that we talked about earlier this spring when we gave a webinar about the changes to the city of Sacramento's general plan, the idea of R1 zoning essentially going away, and the buildings that would go in those places would still be expected to be the size and shape of R1, but no longer limited in the number of units. And this neighborhood also, kind of uniquely within the central city, there are very few blocks that are R1 zoned. And if that changes, then that puts the buildings there at risk. And so part of the purpose of evaluation for historic resources is to identify where are the places that we want to protect and where are the places that aren't eligible that provide opportunity for new growth. Infill sites, parking lots, industrial buildings, recent construction. We're already seeing some projects underway, and there are also some concerns along S Street. About a half a block of buildings between 15th and 16th were approved for demolition, even though really looking at them, it's impossible to tell them from the protected historic buildings in existing historic districts. And because of the zoning of some of these buildings, because they happen to be located along commercial corridors rather than neighborhood streets, the buildings right above in this photo, these are 3 single-story bungalows. This is a mixed neighborhood where there's 1- and 2-story buildings, not just single-family, but also a lot of multifamily. But the city's general plan update originally called for rezoning this area for mid-rise buildings, and there are certainly places along 15th and 16th Street corridor where mid-rise buildings are absolutely appropriate, and they're already zoned, and in some cases they already exist. But part of it, what we want to do is look at it and evaluate what's on the ground and show why this area is eligible as a historic district, not in what people sometimes think of as a neighborhood of grand homes of the wealthy, but a neighborhood of beautiful, useful homes for working people. There has been some work already done in that people have looked at this neighborhood before. In 2003, a local architectural firm or historic resources firm surveyed Richmond Grove and some areas nearby, but it was turned in just before there were massive layoffs of the city's preservation staff. And so the report kind of fell down a hole. And over the course of the intervening 18 years now, a lot has changed. And there were some minor problems with the surveys, which required going back and looking at it again. So that's why we're redoing it. Another thing that has happened is that there was a whole sea change in the way we look at preservation of mid-century modern buildings. A lot of buildings that were not thought of as historic in, say, the 1990s are now eligible historic buildings. And so at least one building in the district. The Nathaniel Colley Law Offices on S Street, designed by James Dodd, was nominated and listed as an individual city landmark. So that's one less building we need to survey. Great news, but there are quite a few others that we still need to look at, and these are some examples of them. The lower left, currently it's a Buddhist temple, but this previously was an Italian apostolic church. And so part of the context of Richmond Grove is like Southside Park. This was a neighborhood of exodus. This was a neighborhood that of people who had essentially been kicked out of the old West End, and Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, and moved into this new neighborhood. And so one of the things that we're asking the consultant to look at is specifically looking at places where these communities built their own institutions and rebuilt them. The Percy Lee House on the upper right-hand corner is another example. It's a, as you can see, a beautiful, streamlined, modern home that was designed for a prominent member of Sacramento's Chinese American community, Percy Lee, and his family still lives there today. In the lower right-hand corner, this is a building on 19th and T Street. This was the first home owned by the Women's Civic Improvement Club, which is an African American community organization that provided not only community advocacy, but also housing for single African American women. They later moved to a larger building on X Street that was demolished by the freeway. They still exist in Oak Park, but this is a building that is directly associated with a very important organization, and so it has that historic connection. It's also a nice home that's been fixed up for a while, and by making it a historic home, that'll make it eligible not only for code exemptions to make rehab easier, but potentially for tax abatements or grants. The consultant that we hired and signed a contract earlier this week is Brunzell Historical, owned by Kara Brunzell. She's a graduate of the Sacramento State Public History Program, and she's done extensive work for Preservation Sacramento and for other individuals in Sacramento nominating historic buildings. Most recently, the listing of the Jefferson School and the North Sacramento School in the National Register of Historic Places. But previous to that, she was the consultant who did another large district for us almost a decade ago now of Newton Booth. And so she has experience doing both Sacramento Register and National Register nominations. She has experience doing large surveys in historic contexts, and she's a known quantity with us. And so there were some really good consultants who applied, people who'd known for a long time, very professional and very qualified, but Brunzell Historical was the selection committee's and the board's first choice. So as for the timetable, I hate reading off lists, but this seemed like the best way to do it. From now, June until August, we're going to review existing survey documents and do a reconnaissance survey, just walking around looking for where are the potential historic buildings, and then start doing research online, and then as archives start to reopen, hopefully in person, and then create an outline, sort of an initial map for what we think the historic districts or landmarks are. August and September, she'll drill down and do more of an intensive survey and a full context statement. So looking at not just the formation of this neighborhood, late 19th century and early 20th century, but the way that it changed over time in significant and historically significant ways. And then phase 3 is creating documentation and holding our first public meetings. Before we even submit it to the city, we want to make sure we're doing multiple meetings and multiple methods of outreach to property owners and residents of Richmond Grove to keep them informed, to let them know what's going on, to let them know why there's a person with an iPad taking notes in their neighborhood. And then finally, we'll move on to deliverables, actually moving the nomination forward and submitting it to the city of Sacramento. That will involve more public meetings, more outreach, meetings of the Preservation Director, the Preservation Commission, and the City Council. And that's what we have so far for Richmond Grove. And we're going to talk more about our planned activities at the end of the meeting when we talk about the home tour. Next on our agenda is Sean deCourcy. Sean, if you can turn on your camera, hopefully it will work. And you should.
I was not allowed to turn on my camera. If you could double check that.
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm not sure why, but for some reason the Zoom room doesn't let attendees turn on their camera, but we'll do what we can. Are you able, so you have the presentation?
Yes, I can share my screen. You don't
Okay.
necessarily need to see my face.
All right, we'll go ahead and have you share your screen.
Oh, it says I'm disabled from sharing my screen as well.
Okay, that's strange. Let me see what I can do here. Oh, there we go. Try it again.
Yes, I can share my screen now.
Okay.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Sean deCourcy. I'm a preservation planner with the city of Sacramento. And as Bill mentioned, Carson Anderson recently retired, the preservation director. He actually, his last day was yesterday. So he asked me to come and speak to you this morning. I checked out the attendee list, and it looks like I know most of you. So it's unfortunately you can't see me, but it's nice to speak with you this morning. So with that, I'm going to give you a brief update on what the city of Sacramento is working on currently, where our efforts are. I should note we have one intern working with us. She is a public history student. We had two interns up until also last week, and we hope to retain a second intern here pretty soon. So no replacement for Director Anderson has been selected yet, and but an announcement should be made within the coming weeks about his replacement. So the first item that we're working on is I shouldn't say the first. These are all the next set of things that I'm going to talk about are landmark and historic district nominations that we're working on. We're working on them in parallel and at different paces depending on the work that needs to be done. So the first item I'm going to talk about, not necessarily the first thing that we're working on, is the Old Sacramento Historic District nomination. So you may be aware that Old Sacramento is a National Register historic landmark district. And we never went through the process to list it on the local register. So it's also listed on the California register, but it's not listed on our local register. It is treated because it's actually a national historic landmark district, which is sort of the next level up from the National Register district. But the district now, when a project comes in, it's routed through our review. So the review process would not change with a local listing. And for that reason, we don't expect opposition from the property owners or from the businesses who operate out of Old Sacramento, but we still have to do a significant amount of outreach. We have a pretty good historic district survey that was done about 6 or 7 years ago, and we've been in the process of updating that and adding some information to it. But we hope to move this forward in the coming months. Begin the process of notifying property owners and having outreach meetings, and then hopefully a hearing towards the end of the summer. Begin the hearing process on that. The next item is 2681 Montgomery Way. The property owner of this, I think a recent property owner, they bought the house and then had a historic survey done by historic environment consultants. Don Cox and Paula Bogosian prepared a analysis of the building. It was designed by Dean and Dean, renowned local architects, as were many of the homes on Montgomery Way. And the property owner has requested that we initiate landmark proceedings for this home. So based on its association with Dean and Dean alone, it appears eligible. And so we're going to be taking this forward here, hopefully relatively soon, for individual landmark listing. Also on Montgomery Way, we have the Gateway Historic District. Several property owners on Montgomery Way, with the assistance of Preservation Sacramento, also retained historic environment consultants to prepare a historic resources survey, which they completed recently. The historic district is from Montgomery Way, along Montgomery Way, from East Curtis to Franklin Boulevard in Curtis Park. this street has an extremely high number of homes designed by Dean and Dean. And even those that were not designed by Dean and Dean maintain the period revival architecture that Dean and Dean are known for. It's a highly intact and cohesive block of buildings in Curtis Park, and we think it does merit historic designation. We're going through the process right now with other property owners who were not involved necessarily in the initiation of the survey and the nomination, trying to answer property owners' questions about what it would mean to become a historic district. And we'll continue to do that. There's some concern about becoming a historic district, so there's a lot of questions, and that's a process that's ongoing. And it sounds like you're going to get a more thorough update on the Eichler Historic District later in the meeting. So I'll keep this relatively brief, but we are in the process of drafting a historic district plan that would accompany a historic district nomination for Southland Park Hills Historic District, which are Eichler homes like the one you see here. The map is on the right. And this is a historic district identified as part of our 2016 citywide mid-century modern historic context statement and survey project, sponsored by Sacramento Modern in partnership with the city and our partners with the state. It was a certified local government grant. And so we've already listed 4 landmarks as part of the process for mid-century modern landmarks, and the historic district was also identified, but the historic districts take more time and outreach, so that's still ongoing. The next 2 slides I'm going to discuss are grants that we're working on at the city. So we've submitted a letter of intent to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, along with over 500 other local governments and nonprofits, for monies or grant funds from the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. This is administered by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, but it's actually a federal fund created by the Congress, the federal Congress. And our project that we propose is to prepare an African American experience, historic context, and focused survey of neighborhoods associated with African American history. The historic context statement would run from the city's early history all the way to the recent past. There would be an oral history component to capture memories from the recent past that are not necessarily written down, and an extensive public outreach campaign that we would undertake. So our letter of intent was then selected among 50 finalists out of the 500 original applicants, and we were invited to submit a full grant application. So we worked with leaders in the African American community and organizations that focus on African American advocacy and neighborhood advocacy in the neighborhoods that we're interested in surveying, and discussed the project with them and put together what we think is a very strong grant application. Preservation Sacramento and Sacramento Modern also signed on as grant partners, like some of these other organizations, such as Oak Park Neighborhood Association, the Sacramento Block Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, to help us support the project should we be selected. And we will know next month if we have been selected, but we are extremely optimistic that our grant will be chosen, or our application will be chosen and the grant funded. And then a grant we have been awarded, not in the application process for, but have actually been awarded by the State Office of Historic Preservation. This is part of our certified local government program. We've been awarded a grant to update the city's preservation, public outreach, and multimedia platforms. So this is something that really arose out of our historic district plan project. We did a lot of outreach as part of our historic district plan update. And we realized that most people who own historic buildings don't even realize that they own historic buildings. And so it gave us, and particularly the preservation director, the idea that we really need to update our public outreach, and then also as part of that, our different platforms. So our website needs an update, and we've done some work on our website, but we could really use a more thorough update by professionals. We're hoping to run pieces on either TV, local TV, or local public radio to publicize the preservation program and what it is we do, along with sending out postcards to property owners on a regular basis, letting them know who to contact and that they own a historic building, and just getting the word out there about what it is that we do with the city's preservation office. So that's our update. Of course, there's lots of other things that we work on a regular basis. We're always conducting our design review process of projects that are coming in to the city, and we're going through a transition now that we're having to deal with Director Anderson retiring and selecting his replacement, and then our intern program. And so we're really excited about our current intern, Alina Stepper. She's working out very well and is very enthusiastic. And so we are excited about her participation, and that program will continue. So with that, I'm going to play a brief tribute to Director Anderson. Unfortunately, he can't be here, but we did show this. We did show this tribute to him at our staff meeting this week. And I'll just need a moment to cue up our audio here. Bear with All right. So that's our tribute to Director Anderson. I also want to thank everybody who provided photographs from this. We did put out a call from those in Preservation Sacramento and historic environment consultants in Sacramento Modern and several developers who all contributed photos to this montage, which shows the work that Director Anderson was a part of during his 5 years as preservation director. So congratulations, Carson, on your retirement. It's well deserved. He's had a long career in the private sector as well prior to joining the city. So with that, I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Bill.
Thanks. We did get one question from one of the attendees that I wanted to pass along regarding how the Old Sacramento survey is being funded, or if there are any funding sources involved in that.
The survey was completed it was actually updated when Roberta Deering, the former preservation director, towards the end of her tenure. So it was around 2014, 2015, that the survey was completed. And I do not know how the survey was funded. It may have been funded by Old Sacramento or the Business Improvement District in Old Sacramento. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer, but it was before my time technically with the city, or I guess in the interim after I left the city as an intern and then came back as staff. It occurred at some point in that time. So yeah, I don't know how it was funded, but I do believe it was prepared by a historic consultant, and I don't believe it was done by volunteers. I think AECOM or Mead and Hunt possibly prepared it, but yeah, I don't know that for certain, fortunately.
Okay, great. Thank you. And for anyone else, you can, if you want to ask a question, you can type it into the chat or the Q&A, or you can raise your hand. Later on, we'll actually be, if you have opportunities for live Q&A, and actually our next speaker or speakers is going to be John Vignacchi and Martine Rubicalva of Urban Capital. You can turn your cameras on. I figured out how to do that. And you should also be able to share your screen. So John, if you want to go ahead and share the screen and begin your presentation.
Yeah, all right, great. Thank you, Bill. Happy Saturday. Good morning, everybody. Let me minimize this. Okay. All right, my name is John Vignacchi. I'm the CEO of Urban Capital. We're here to talk to you today about two projects at 16th and E and 15th and G. These are multifamily mixed-use projects. Just quickly on who we are. I live in Boulevard Park on 24th and I Street. My CFO and fellow business partner, Chris Garner, he lives in Alkali Flat, as does Martine Rubalcava. So that rounds out the Urban Capital team. Then we're also working with Rashid Amadou. He's an informal member of our team. He's a local chef, and he'll be the executive chef at 15th and G. And then my sister, Jo Vignacchi, who's an eviction defense attorney down in Santa Barbara County. She's helping us with some of our leases. And the reason why we've retained her is actually we're providing a different type of housing model. I wouldn't necessarily call this a new approach, but it's an approach that we're bringing back from the past. We're offering 100% lease to own condominiums in both of these buildings. So I'll talk about the buildings in a minute, but really quickly wanted to hit on the housing that we offer. So what this lease to own business model does, it allows lessors to build up ownership interests in their condominium over time. You can basically come with $0 down, and for roughly the price of what it costs to rent a market rate building in 10 years, you could have the option to buy the property. We do 10 years because there's this liability hurdle in California. There's a lot of frivolous HOA lawsuits that prevent condominiums from being developed, which is a shame because that really closes a great pathway to home ownership for a lot of people. And a lot of banks, builders, architects, and engineers don't touch condominiums because it adds a tremendous liability cost. And that makes the cost very prohibitive. But if we do lease to own with a 10-year option, people can build up equity through an amortizing payment, just like a mortgage works. So we work backwards from what we think the price of the unit will be. So they range between $400,000 and $660,000 for a 1 and 3 bedroom, respectively. We amortize that over 30 years and provide a monthly payment that remains fixed over the life of the 10 years. The lessors, they sign a lease agreement, just like a normal lease agreement. But then they also sign an option agreement stating that if they maintain their monthly payments over the next 10 years, they have the option to buy the unit for $400,000 to $600,000 less whatever equity credits they've built up over those 10 years. If they default, if they vacate, if they leave, they still get a percentage of their equity back, or they still get their equity back. They can sublet their units as well. We step in as property manager. And so we view this as kind of a new innovative model in housing. It's not necessarily new, but we're bringing it back from the past. And this is really core to our housing model. It's something different, and we're really targeting kind of a way to really increase home ownership. There's a lot of people I know, younger folks and working class folks, who would love to stay in Midtown and downtown, but it's really hard to find housing. It's hard to save up 20%. And it's a great neighbor. These are great neighborhoods in Midtown, but the entry price point can be quite prohibitive for some folks. And so we're looking to solve that. The first property I'll walk you through is 15G. It's 26 units, 2,000 square foot ground floor restaurant, and about 26,000 square feet for condominiums. We have 1 roof deck. There's no parking in this building. We're looking into arranging with the Memorial Garage in the city of Sacramento to leverage that parking garage, which even though the mansion and apartments are also using that, we think it's still highly underutilized. And then 16E, I'll go into these projects a little bit deeper. I just wanted to give you a quick overview. 16E is also, it's about 20 units, a little bit smaller site, about just over 19,000 square feet for the condominiums and the live work units. Also 1 roof deck, and as well, no parking on this. Just going to Google Maps here. So here you can see, this is now the Eleanor Apartments, beautiful apartment building that SKK developed. We have the 16E parcel here. Chris Garner and our office building is actually located in Chris's house at 1514 E Street. So my business partner owns this property and also owns the property next door. He's been rehabbing both of these historic homes. And so we're investing a healthy amount of capital in into this neighborhood. And we also consider ourselves, residents of the neighborhood. Keeps our operating costs low, being able to work out of Chris's house. But it's just the 3 of us for now. So hopefully one day we'll get a proper office, but for now that suffices. 15th and G is right next to the Sacramento Theater Company's Wells Fargo Center here, Performing Arts Center, and Milka Coffee. And you have the Holiday Inn Express, and then the beautiful Mansion Inn Apartments here and age 16. And so this is where we're proposing the 15th and G project. And then we have another development as well that's ready to break ground as soon as lumber prices and building prices come down off of 13th and D over here. But that's obviously not being discussed today. So just wanted to give a quick aerial and also talk about us being community members here. So the first project here, this is 15th and G. So this is looking across 15th Street. Basically, if you were standing in front of Milka and looking at the building, this is what it would look like. We've pulled the building back off the face or in the frontage of G Street, and then stepped the building back so we're not towering over this beautiful triplex that's next door. We are building out to the alley and articulating the building using a mix of materials. This is going to be brick. Brick here where you see the red. This will be metal siding, nice metal siding, something similar to like what you see the ice blocks or a lot of types of materials that Ron Velakis uses in his buildings. That's where we pulled a lot of our design inspiration from. I really love what Ron, love his style and taste. And then also plaster as well. And so this is one view of the building. Then we have looking at G Street. So this is looking head on to the building. And this is the shot that you're already familiar with. Let me go a little bit bigger here. And another view. So this is a good view of the restaurant. So this will have outdoor dining space. So this corner will be really activated. It's nice, you know, when you have performances and the theater companies being used again. This will provide a great neighborhood eatery and bar where people can enjoy some delicious food, and also activate this corner being outdoor seating, taking advantage of Sacramento's beautiful weather. There will also be live work units down here on the downstairs, first floor, ground floor. So the restaurant really only occupies about a quarter of the space. Just under a quarter of the space downstairs. And then the 26 units are comprised of 3 live work units on the ground floor, and then the remaining 23 units upstairs. And then this is looking down 15th Street again from the sidewalk, street walk perspective. We're looking at putting in a restaurant seating in between the beautiful elm trees that sit here, and so we're still working on that with our designers. I skipped over actually an important part. Let me go back. We are working with Williams and Patton on the design, so a great local architecture firm. We're also working with Wilson Design Studios Landscape Architecture, also a local firm, and deCourcy Builders out of Rancho Cordova. deCourcy is the general contractor behind the Mansion Inn, and also the Anthem property as well, just a few blocks away. And so they're a great local firm. They've been wonderful to collaborate with. And we have to thank SKK for actually putting us in touch with them. They've been a fantastic group to work with. So we've got a great design team, important partners for us. So that is 15G. I want to walk you through 16E. Oops. There we go. Okay, so 16E. So this is the north elevation. So if we're looking at this, this is our office is somewhere right here. So this is our next door neighbor, Chris's next door neighbor. And we're looking across E Street with 16th Street running in this direction. As you can see, ground floor, very similar. There'll be live work units downstairs. Similar mix of materials. This is actually, instead of plaster, this will be all metal and brick with an exposed staircase that's behind this beautiful metal siding that's actually see-through. And so when we light this up, we're thinking about doing a cool design in the mesh of the metal. And then also you see this roof deck here. I'll give you a better aerial perspective, but this is just one elevation. This is the other elevation from looking across 16th Street. We are towering over this duplex. We actually know these duplex owners. They're a really nice husband and wife couple that use this on Airbnb. This is not in a historic district. This house is not, and it's not a contributing resource. And we're actually in discussions with the owners to potentially acquire this property, merge the properties, and move this. We don't want to raise it. We'd like to find another location for it to move, so the building can grow, and we're not towering over right next to another duplex. If we can make that work, that's great. If you know of any empty lots or want to sell us one that would fit a duplex, please let us know, because we're on the hunt right now. But yeah, so this is a good view. This elevation currently shows a parking garage that's actually being remodeled and redesigned. I should say redesigned. We took out all the parking here primarily for cost reasons. Parking is very expensive, and the max number of parking spots that we could get in here was 4, and we just figured it wasn't worth it. There are 2 existing curb cuts for us on 16th and E. And we're working with the Gig and AAA company behind Gig to put dedicated Gig vehicles there, and converting those curb cuts into permanent parking spots. We need to work with Department of Public Works on that. But those 2 Gig cars will be dedicated to the building and to the residents for their use. So that will help cut down on the need for a car. And then also, there's the parking garage about 3 to 4 blocks away, in addition to a bunch of other modes of transport. Both buildings, I should state, also have long-term bike and scooter storage on the ground floor, enough spaces for every unit in the building. And so we're very much encouraging this trend of the future of mobility with shared mobility and also alternatives to traditional car ownership. You've already seen this, but this is the image that's on the front of our building. Let me get you to the more interesting image here. So this is the aerial perspective of both buildings. You can see, so this roof deck will be nice and landscape, provide residents with an ability to enjoy the outdoors and get some fresh air. And it also steps the building back from the owner of this building. We have a great relationship with the owner of this building. He's very supportive of the project. We met with the neighborhood association, and they were overwhelmingly supportive and positive on both projects, which was really great. They were also, providing us development suggestions and things that they thought the neighborhood needed. And so as we build out and develop more properties in this part of town, we're looking forward to partnering with them more to increase the beautiful neighborhood that this is. So I'll keep that short. That's basically the end. Oh, actually, one more thing. So I just want to summarize quickly the community benefits. Actually, this is important. So we are embracing Sacramento small businesses. Rashid is a local chef. This will be his first restaurant at the ground floor of 15th and G. He's from Chicago originally. He's been in Sacramento for about 5 years, doing a lot of pop-up restaurants. He worked at Urban Roots for a while. He has a Nigerian background, and so he wants to do a Nigerian-American fusion restaurant at the bottom of 15th and G. We've partnered with the Irish Hospitality Group. That's the company behind De Vere's Sacramento, De Vere's Davis, The Snug, and Rochambeau to be the operators of the restaurant. So because this is Rashid's first restaurant, we want to make sure that he's super successful.
It's all there, the tail fin, the gearbox.
It's like, Steven, looks like you're not on mute. Okay. All right. So we're actually taking, investing in that business, building out the whole space, providing all the tenant improvements, all the capital costs, and helping Rashid get his restaurant up and off the ground. As I mentioned, we're focusing a lot on shared mobility on both sides, trying to work in dedicated parking stalls for gig EVs, and then also at the bike storage. These are 100% electric buildings, so there will be no gas except for the restaurant. Haven't convinced Rashid yet that he should be cooking on an induction range, but he still wants gas, and got to give the chef what he needs to make delicious food. So, and the big thing really that we're offering here is a workforce housing. We think that's affordable by design. While these are market rate rentals, we're providing a different pathway to home ownership. And this lease to own opportunity really provides a home ownership pathway for Sacramento's mainstay citizens, which we think is really important. Obviously, we're going to be investing a lot in open spaces and landscaping between the two private rooftop lounges, but also activating the corner of 15th and G, and then re-landscaping the corner of 16th and E, making that a lot more beautiful than it currently is. There is a beautiful elm tree that's right there on the corner. And so we really want to, enhance that elm tree and build in additional landscaping features into the building footprint. And then your standard public improvements, undergrounding electrical lines, and really that's primarily it, undergrounding the electrical lines on 15th and G. And so taking away those power lines, 2 blocks of power lines, and putting those underground. So with that, I'll pause, and it looks like there's some questions in the chat and some comments. So I don't know, Bill, how do you typically handle this? Do you want me to? Let's see, do you want me to just pop these open and see what questions? Will there be street lighting? Oh, hi, Margaret. I know Margaret. There will be street lighting. I believe there's already some good street lighting on 16th and E. Certainly it's something that we can look at if the city doesn't require it. Will you provide parking? Will you provide charging stations for the EV? Yeah, so we're looking at that as well as part of the gig cars, putting in permanent parking as well. Sorry, putting in permanent charging infrastructure. We need to work with the city on that and with the NICE and finalize how we do that. But that is the goal. It would be ideal to put a a charging station there where those two existing curb cuts are located. Yeah, so that's, and then let's see, there was also some things in the chat. Always nervous after, you know, social media, looking at what the comments are going to be here. Let's see. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, actually, all right.
Yeah, those were the two comments that
Okay,
we had.
got it. Okay, cool.
All right. If there are any other questions of the attendees, you could enter it into the chat, or you could raise your hand, either one.
Okay, well, if you have any other questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to reach out to Bill. Bill has my email. Feel free to email me directly. I live in the neighborhood. Happy to hear your thoughts and concerns directly. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. And Bill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much for the presentation and for the information, and we'll be in contact.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the microphone for Stephen Ropp, who is the owner of Repurposed Salvage. And I think he might be calling in via telephone. Stephen, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you.
Great.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you. So I'll just let you go ahead and take it away. Maybe you could just tell everybody who you are, what you do, and show us around.
Okay, great. Well, I apologize for butting in earlier. I didn't have the microphone muted. I've managed to go the whole quarantine COVID area without doing a Zoom meeting, so this is my first one.
Okay.
So my name's Stephen Ropp.
Yeah, sorry, we lost the picture.
Okay.
I don't know if you turned something off or not.
Let's see. Might have.
Great.
How about now?
We're good.
They're working now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So my name's Stephen Ropp, and I have a small business here in Sacramento called Repurposed Salvage and Furniture. And been making furniture, custom furniture, for about 15 years. And I started looking for these old barns for the wood. And then I always had way more wood than I needed, so I started selling to other builders. So I supply a lot of, cabinet makers and furniture builders and craftspeople and designers and stuff like that. And so I've had this business now for about 6 years, and I'm actually located in Depot Park, which is the old U.S. Army Depot here in Sacramento. And I'm about a block over from Urban Wood Rescue. Some of you might know that business. And I was reaching out to Preservation Sacramento because I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of what we do, and it would be beneficial for me to reach your guys' audience, and I think vice versa. So as I mentioned, I mostly take down old barns and buildings, and I can't actually see the camera, but can you guys see okay in the yard?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay. So, for example, these are some bridge beams that I just picked up. These are from the Bridgeport wooden covered bridge in Penn Valley. So that's a bridge that goes back to 1862, and Caltrans is currently in a 3-year project of rebuilding it. And I was able to acquire some of these beams for repurposing as, furniture or decorative pieces. So that's the main part of my business. But I do also do architectural salvage. So I've got a section here of my salvage yard, which is doors and windows and hardware and sinks and that kind of stuff. So whenever I'm out in Land Park or East Sac and I see a contractor working on a house, I do stop and try to talk to them. And here's some windows, for example. So this is out of I think it's 1930 house on Freeport Boulevard, so in the Land Park neighborhood. But, most contractors just throw this stuff in the trash because it's easier for them, time's money, and they don't want to mess with it, or they don't know what it is really, the value of it. So I do have this section of architectural salvage here. And so I think it would make, I would really I think a lot of my customers and a lot of people come to my yard would benefit by knowing about you guys and, as a resource, because a lot of times homeowners, are buying an older house and they want to start working on it and they don't know how to save older stuff or what's old, what's new. And they bring in a contractor and the contractor starts tearing everything out and putting in all this Home Depot stuff, which looks ridiculous. So that's in a nutshell what I do. I will mention also that this is a second career for me. My background is actually in cultural anthropology. So I do have a PhD in cultural anthropology. I've worked in museums and libraries. I've worked on historical preservation projects. I've done a lot of grant writing. I don't particularly enjoy doing grant writing, but I've done a lot of it. So I think maybe there's some opportunities for us to work together on that and do some grant writing or some outreach and with the city or local government to kind of intervene and, get to these houses before the contractors and the house flippers do and just tear everything out and put in everything new. So that's what I wanted to offer today. And are we going to open it up for questions, or I don't know what your format is exactly?
All right. Yeah, well, we're pretty free form. This is really exciting to see. A long time ago, some longtime Sacramento residents may remember there was a place called Bob's Supply off 16th Street that had a lot of stuff like this, but they closed down, gosh, nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely timely now, considering the price of wood, things like that, of construction materials.
Yeah.
That really changes it. Has that changed the equation as far as people's interest in salvaged lumber or salvaged materials?
Well, I'll tell you that the main part of my business is the large beams, the siding, and then the tin. But in the last year with this big run up in lumber prices, I've had a lot of people looking for just framing lumber. So I've got, full dimension 2x4s from the 1930s, really clear, tight grain redwood and red fir. And so, yeah, I've been moving that stuff. It's funny because I haven't changed my prices in 6 years because it's sort of what it goes into it for me hasn't changed. But new lumber obviously is through the roof right now. So I am getting people looking for just 2x6s and regular framing lumber. But here's my other yard over here too. So.
Yeah. One of our longtime members, Susan Heenis, mentioned there used to be a company called Wood Butchers as well. And then folks who know the Bay Area know there's a couple of places like Omega Salvage and Urban Ore that have this kind of thing. So it's great to have another resource like this. And maybe what might be useful is we could drop off some postcards. We've got some Preservation Sacramento postcards that might be useful for your customers if you have a place near your office. And then Sean mentioned that the city is working on an official postcard that tells people what being a historic property is. And the idea was both to send them out to property owners, but it might be a great thing to have at your business or maybe other businesses that have a preservation focus. All right,
well, I was hoping to get in that loop because I think that there's been some change too in the building code where they are requiring a certain amount of recycling that contractors don't just put 100% into the landfill. And so I'm trying to reach those contractors and those homeowners and let them know that I can come and take material and that lowers their dump fees and the stuff gets saved and it gets reused. And then also I have things that contractors or homeowners can use if they want to put something, period correct back in their house.
And one of our long-range legislative goals, this was something that's been talked about for many years, is a deconstruction ordinance, essentially requiring deconstruction rather than demolition, because there's the old preservation saw about the greenest building is one that's already built, and the fact that a large proportion of what's in our landfills is the chunks of old buildings from demolition, as well as the waste materials from new construction. Ridiculous. So And I have a couple of questions.
Now you're... Yeah, go ahead.
I guess she says, I have a question that came in. Is there a fee for picking stuff up? Or I guess you charge for there's a charge for the materials.
Well, no, the equation, the ideal for me is that you give it to me and I take it.
Okay.
That's the ideal for me. If there's a lot of waste, if there's a lot of dry rot or termite damage or things that I'm going to end up taking to the dump, then I would say, okay, there's going to be $100, dump fee. But for the most part, I'm just trying to take it off your hands and get it into somebody's hands who can use it.
Okay.
So no.
All right. And then right now, what's really the best way to contact you?
Well, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and then I would say text. This is I'm logging in on my cell phone number. So you feel free to give out my cell phone number, call, text, send me pictures of things you come across, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
All right.
Should I give out my number?
Sure.
Okay, it's 916-261-9879.
All right. And then where the other question that came in is, where is your yard located? You said it was in Depot Park?
Yeah, so I'm inside of Depot Park. It's a business park. And my address is 6076 Massimo Street. But I will tell you that when they converted this from the Army Depot to a business park, they made up a lot of these streets. So if you put in that address, it doesn't always show up correctly. But you have my phone number, and then I'm about a block west of Urban Wood Rescue, just so you can have a sense of where I'm at inside the yard. And a lot of people know this place because of Ferguson. Ferguson is a major supplier for a lot of contractors and builders, and they're at the front of the business park, and I'm in the back.
All right. And then what are your retail hours? What hours are you open?
Well, I'm open right now. I'm open on Saturdays from 9 to 1, and then during the week is by appointment. So during the week, I'm out, taking down a barn or picking up doors or doing something or building something. But I am around during the week. It's just you gotta make an appointment.
All right. I think the only other question, you had someone who asked, it says they're looking for Eichler style metal windows. Is that do you have materials of mid-century modern style, or is it mostly kind of more the 19th century or early 20th century?
It's mostly, yeah, I'd say mostly early 20th century wooden windows. I do have some 50s and 60s stuff, aluminum framed windows. Actually, I don't have any in stock right now, but I do pick those up. Screen doors. I do come across some mid-century modern stuff. Pretty much anything 50s and older is what I focus on.
All right, and then had a person ask for your phone number one more time.
Sure, it's 916-261-9879.
All right. Well, thanks for the look around your yard and for introducing us to your business, and we'll do what we can to spread the word, and hopefully some of the people watching this will show up. You're open till 1,
sure,
maybe next week. All right.
Well, yeah, I'm here every Saturday, so people are welcome to come by and take a look around and talk. And if I know what people are looking for, then I can also keep an eye out, because I know a lot of other pickers and salvage people too, so I can find most things in terms of old building supplies. And I just want to mention too, before I go, that you're talking about doing some of the legislative side and getting an ordinance in terms of deconstruction, and that's something that I'm really excited about. I mean, that's sort of the nature, that's at the heart of what I do. So I would really love to be part of that process of advocating for that and trying to get that in place.
All right. Well, we'd love to have you as a member, and that applies to everybody hearing this broadcast. We're a membership-based organization, and member fees, member participation in events, or letter writing and email writing, and even participation on the board all helps move the community forward, as we want to be representative of the community's voice. All right. Well, thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
And we'll be in touch soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Goodbye. All right. We had a couple other questions come in. while the presentation was going on, there was a question about update about the vacant houses on 21st between P and Q, and I see those all the time, so I've been keeping a close eye on them. I did actually run into a person I know who's involved with the owners. They're keeping their eyes open. There's been a lot of utilities work on the corner, and probably a lot of electrical utilities and other utility work that needs to be done before some of the rehab work gets underway. And so the permits are moving forward. They're in process, but it's slow. But we're keeping an eye on it, and that's about all the updates that we have. The other question was from a member of the public. It was, okay, speaking of rehab, this is from Dinah Malkin. And speaking of rehab, will there be some grants in the future for rehab project on historic homes? The main grant program in the city of Sacramento is called the Historic Places Grant. And it's not a revolving funds. It gets funded periodically, and then when the money is spent, it goes away. And there were some money injected into the program a couple of years ago as a result of increase in fees from cannabis-based businesses. And so the Sacramento Heritage Incorporated, of which I'm also on the board of, recently did a round of grants. And so about something on the order of 50,000 or 100,000 or so in grants was paid out with what was left of those funds. And there was a small amount left that Sacramento Heritage is focusing on making available for red tag cases where there are historic buildings that are in danger of being demolished, and because they're open code files, and using those funds to be able to pay for emergency stabilization and repair. And there probably won't be any more historic places grants until the city refunds the program. That's another thing that we as an advocacy organization can ask. And the nice thing about the historic places grant is ordinarily it is a matching grant. You have to be a historic building to qualify, but if ordinarily up to $25,000, you provide $25,000 max, and the grant matches it. But for qualifying low-income households, you do not need a match. And that's really the target, is getting the word out to more communities, more people who need repair but don't have the funds themselves. If they have a qualified building and their income is sufficiently low, then they don't need the match. But well, that all depends on the money coming back into the program. All right, our next speaker, as far as in the realm of advocacy and preservation statewide, is Jonathan Haeber from California Preservation Foundation, and he's here to talk about, we asked him to come and talk about the upcoming California Preservation Conference, which is happening next month and will be online, so anyone in the state can attend. So John, I'll just let you take it away.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm the person from CPF today because when William asked me, I hadn't looked at the calendar, and I asked the other staff members and they said, oh, you can take it. And then I realized it was on a Saturday. So you have me today, but I just wanted to thank William for inviting us. I just wanted to talk a little bit about our annual conference this year. As many of you know, because I see some names here on the list, some of you were on our conference committee 2 years ago when we planned our conference in Sacramento. And then COVID hit, and everything changed. So this will be our second year doing a completely virtual program. So it's been a challenge, but a lot of fun. We are excited about the upcoming programs this year. And particularly for this year, we completely changed everything. The whole planning process was sort of thrown on its head. So I'll talk about the conference a little later. But William wanted me to provide some updates about what CPF is doing and what's coming up at CPF. You'll see here on the screen, these are some of our award winners from last year for our annual preservation awards. And again, this year we will be presenting our awards online, free to the public. This will be the second time we've had a free awards program open to everybody, and it's a great opportunity to look at some of the best work in the state, some of the really innovative work. And you'll notice second from the right on the middle row is the Sacramento Municipal Utility District headquarters, which last year won a Trustees Award for Excellence. So we're very interested in seeing some Sacramento entries this year. And this year in particular, we're going to be offering a lower entry fee for entries that come from community groups or nonprofits. And I'm pretty sure it'll be steeply discounted. So we want to encourage smaller projects as well as projects supported by nonprofits and community groups. And we can send you more information about that. But if you visit californiapreservation.org/awards, you'll find the entry form, and the deadline, I believe, is June 21st. So we're about a month away from the deadline. The conference this year is titled Reframing Preservation, Leading from the West Coast. And we wanted to involve a very broad coalition of people from across the state, coming from a very diverse group in all senses of that term, of people involved in advocacy, preservation, even people that are not necessarily preservationists themselves, but are working on like-minded programs or projects. So the dates for the conference are from June 8th to 10th this year, and it will be, I believe, Tuesday to Thursday. And this year, we used to have what we called tracks for the conference. This year, the committee was very insistent, and I thought it was a wonderful idea to call them values this year. So we're really thinking deeply about the themes that we have for the conference. And there are 4 values, and I'll go into each of them one by one, as well as the programs that fall under those values. We'll start with relevance. Relevance was something the committee asked in terms of how preservation looks at some of the most challenging aspects of this century, things that make preservation relevant to all people in the state, and as well as outside of the state. But this track will involve broad groups of community members and speakers and panelists who will address different topics within the theme of relevance. One is community, one is health, one is shelter, and the last is climate. So they'll address things like affordable housing, the connections between history and health, how to approach resiliency and climate change, and in terms of community, how to involve the broadest coalition of community groups within a neighborhood. So there will be some really interesting discussions, and these are all in the open panel, sort of open discussion format with time for questions. Second, we have repair. Now, repair is about looking at painful moments, trying to make reparations, trying to right the past, the wrongs of the past, and erase painful moments, or at least discuss painful moments and work through them. And we have at least four sessions within this value, one on racial justice and histories of violence, one on LGBTQ heritage, one on the Black Lives Matter movement and how that connects to history and memory and sites of expression and social justice. And finally, we have one on segregation and redlining to look at sites that sort of intersect with this history of redlining within neighborhoods across the state. The third value is imagination and vision. This is our value that approaches looking at things from a creative and new direction in terms of inclusiveness, how to look at integrated approaches to including the broadest group of neighborhood members. We're going to look at, we have a 3-hour session, which is the longest of the conference, that will look at the California Cultural Districts program. And I see a question here that I'll just address right now since I saw it. The Lyon Martin residents will be addressed at the conference, I believe, under the LGBTQ heritage session. So that is under the track I just discussed, the repair track. And then finally, we have, so the California Cultural Districts program will be about a 3-hour session looking at how to recognize, designate, interpret cultural districts across the state. Then we also have one on mitigation efforts, creative mitigation efforts to look at community heritage and how to make meaningful mitigation using imaginative sort of approaches. And then finally, out of the 4 values, we also have one called excellence and innovation. And this was a broad approach. We didn't just want to look at technical, like materials-based sort of excellence and innovation, but also things like the use of new other technologies, digital technologies, how to rethink integrity in new innovative ways, how to look at heritage like from a different aspect other than the visual aspect, from the sort of sense of smell and the sense of hearing, and then how to communicate things through other new platforms like podcasts. So we have some really interesting podcasters out there who will be talking about their efforts. And we have some special programs. So our evening events usually fall under the special programs. We have a keynote address this year by Robert Stanton, who was the first African-American director of the National Park Service. We're really excited that our SHPO, Julianne Polanco, will discuss heritage with Mr. Stanton, and that will be a 1-hour program on the 8th. And then we also have some evening programs, one on neon heritage with the folks from the Glendale Neon Museum, and then also the San Francisco Neon group that does the Neon Speaks Festival. So that'll be an evening program. And then we also have one that looks at a particular site in Southern California from 2 different perspectives. One is the hair documentation efforts at the Santa Susana testing laboratory, where a lot of rocket testing was done for the early space programs. And then also, especially having the Native American groups involved. As many of you know, last year it was recognized as well as a very large cultural landscape associated with Native American heritage and was passed on as a National Register site. So we have the Fernandino and the Gabrieleno and the Chumash tribes involved in that program to talk about the importance of the site from their perspective. Registration this month is 50% off because of Preservation Month. So you only have about 7 days or so, 9 days until that discount ends. So encourage you to register early. You can also register for a single day. If you're a student, it's free this year, completely free, the whole conference. If you're a speaker, it's free, of course. And we're also introducing a group ticket rate for, we call it the Civic Engagement Package, because usually it's for the cities. And they can purchase a batch of 10 tickets at a very steep discount, and included with that is a $150 membership with CPF. So they would be able to access all our other programs throughout the year. Now, some other, I'm looking at my time here, some other CPF updates. I usually am not the person to present these things. Usually it's Cindy, but I can give you as much as I know about these efforts under CPF. The California Historic Tax Credit is moving forward. As many of you know, it was passed by the legislature, but then COVID hit and our budget was impacted in the state, and it was shelved for, a year or two. This year, it's actually moving forward through the budget process, and the budget committee is looking at it, I believe, right now this week. So it's looking encouraging. It's likely, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that it will go through the budget process and that we will have a tax credit by next year. So keep an eye out on our website. We'll update you by email. And then also wanted to introduce some new programs for support from CPF. We want to give back to communities, especially students. And so we have a new program called Underrepresented California, where we will pair a student with a mentor. It's a grant application for the registration of a national register or state register or local register even site to get it designated if it's associated with an underrepresented site, meaning any sites that currently aren't being recognized in the National Register or any other register that should be. So that's, I believe, a $3,000 annual grant that starts. We're hoping to announce it at the conference, and then it will be every year thereafter. So keep an eye out on our website for that. I mentioned the awards program and the new fee for nonprofits and community members. It was wonderful seeing Mr. Director Anderson's tribute video. He's retiring, and that means that we get to have him now. So he will be a new trustee as long as he's voted in during our annual meeting, but he will be a new trustee for CPF. So we welcome him to the CPF fold. We also have Antonio Castillo from West Hollywood and Annabelle Enriquez from Los Angeles. So we welcome all of our new board members, and we have 2 board members that are also being that are joining us again, renewing their trustee involvement. So just wanted to thank you all for your time. I'm going to be pasting some links into the chat box with some conference schedules and everything, but we do encourage you, as we also encourage you to join the Sacramento organization. We also encourage you to join CPF. Your membership and donations and support allows us to do all of these wonderful things, and we thank you for all of that. So with that, there's our contact information, and I hope I was under 15 minutes. So I'm gonna stop sharing and put those things into the chat box.
Terrific. Thank you. That time worked out just fine. And there was one question: is Preservation Sacramento a member of CPF? And yes, absolutely. We're proud members of as an organization of CPF, and so we're happy to collaborate and share our efforts and our strength wherever we can.
Yeah,
And
we love having you.
and our next speaker is this is Dane and Susan Heenis, and they're here to talk about the proposed Eichler Historic District, which Sean mentioned very briefly, but we wanted to save the most of the important news and updates for this part of the presentation. So Dane and Susan, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, can you see us? Do you switch us over?
Yes.
Okay. Are we there?
You're there.
Okay.
So you should be if you have a presentation, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, so I'll share the screen, and we want to select that one and share, and I'll hit play. Okay.
So I just want to give you a quick introduction. We will be talking about the status of the proposed Eichler Historic District, but we also wanted to give everyone a little background, some history about Joseph Eichler and the work that he did in Sacramento, and then also talk about some of the key architectural characteristics that define Eichlers here in Sacramento. So that's what the context will be pretty much. So.
Okay, well, it's working. Great. Hi, everybody. So, so Joseph Eichler was born in 1900 and died in 1974. He was a post-war American builder known for developing distinctive residential subdivisions of mid-century modern style tract housing in California. He was an influential advocate of bringing modern architecture from custom residences and large corporate buildings to general public availability. He rented a Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian house in Burlingame, and that had a big impact on his life. And also working with architect Robert Anshin, who designed his personal home when Eichler was starting out as a home builder, also made a big impression. Eichler was building kind of little cracker box type homes at first, and And Anshin said, hey, why don't you give me a chance to design some of your homes? And he said, I would, but you're too expensive. They said, well, let me give a shot. So that's kind of how their relationship evolved. So, and that was, so Eichler, most builders customarily did not hire licensed professional architects to design their homes. They had people on staff that would draw plans, and they would, you know, throw different facades on them and kind of do it that way. Whereas Eichler used renowned architectural firms like Anshin and Allen in San Francisco, Jones and Emmons in Los Angeles, and later Claude Oakland, who was formerly with Anshin and Allen. The Eichlers in Sacramento were primarily Jones and Emmons designs. And Jones and Emmons also designed some interesting officers' housing near the McClellan Air Force Base in 1957. It was called K Park Housing. And they're still there, and they're now, I guess, townhomes. And it's pretty neat. If you can go out there and get through the gate, it's fun to drive around and look at because they're really cool. Eichler was the first developer to strike racial covenants. Typically, back in the day, there were restrictions in neighborhoods that said, you know, can't sell to Jewish people, African Americans, Asians, and but Eichler was considered by some to be a social visionary, and he commissioned designs primarily for middle-class Americans. But one of his stated aims was to construct inclusive and diverse planned communities, ideally featuring integrated parks and community centers. But he established a non-discrimination policy. He offered homes for sale to anyone of any religion or race. In fact, in 1958, he resigned from the National Association of Home Builders when they refused to support a non-discrimination policy. So Sacramento was the first expansion for Eichler outside of the Bay Area. Between 1949 and 1966, Eichler Homes built over 11,000 homes, including a high-rise apartment building in San Francisco, in 9 communities in Northern California, and homes in 3 communities in Southern California, and 3 in Chestnut Ridge, New York.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain the illustration that you see on the left. That is a vintage aerial view of the Eichlers in Sacramento. Anything with a white roof is an Eichler. And so you can see that they were some of the first homes built in this neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. So here's an ad for Eichlers for the Eichler development in Sacramento. Probably ran in the Sacramento Bee, Sacramento Union. But they planned to build 140 homes, but they only built 62, and 55 remain today, and a few of them are almost unrecognizable because of bad remodels. And expansion to Sacramento wasn't a financially successful venture because costs ran high and sales were flat. I spoke with Marty Arbonich, who is the publisher of California Modern Magazine and author of Eichler Modernism Rebuilds the American Dream, years ago, and he said that Joe's son, Ned Eichler, told him that contrary to the common misconception that Sacramento was a backwater town that didn't get Eichlers, Ned said there were some people like that, but there were people like that everywhere. Eichler was mostly bringing in their materials from the Bay Area suppliers and also their work crews and putting them up in local motels. The crews had a system down, and Eichler was also very loyal to his crews. The cost overruns were ultimately what made them decide to bail on Sacramento. And the surrounding lots intended for Eichlers, as you could see in that previous photo, they were empty for 2 years until they were filled in with more conventional ranch houses. So these are we put together a presentation of what we think are defining characteristics of Eichler homes in Sacramento.
Okay, the first characteristic, the original Eichlers here in Sacramento were single-story homes. And this is a great example of one. They are long and narrow with flat roofs, as well as, next size. This is another flat roof. Some of them do have a slightly sloping roof, but these are two examples of flat roof. There's an example of the roof line that is sloping, and some of them have. This is one where you see there's a combination of both the flat and the sloping roof line. So all of these are original features.
Some of the ones that were all flat roof, the interior of the house is also all flat roof. And the ones that have the peaked roof will have arching roof lines inside. There's another flat roof design inside and out. And another notable thing is that a lot of the mechanical systems are on the roof in Sacramento. And in the Bay Area, they mostly had radiant heat and they didn't have the need for air conditioning. So they would have maybe an occasional swamp cooler. The radiant heat systems eventually failed in all but I think 2 or 3 homes in Sacramento. And so that necessitated the need for rooftop furnaces and air conditioning systems.
And in the future, we're hoping that design guidelines will discourage people from putting the ductwork up front. We understand that sometimes it's impossible, but this is an example where the roof line is still, you can see there's ductwork, but it isn't terribly noticeable.
Another characteristic is the vertical groove siding. It's a 2-inch on center T111, and it's used in all the Sacramento Eichlers.
Now, one of the problems is is finding this now. That is going to be one of the challenges of people that either want to add something to the front or even repair badly damaged. It is hard to find, and when you can find it, it's very expensive.
There's a firm in the Bay Area called Eichler Siding that makes it, and they also make they use different sidings for different Eichler projects, and this guy remanufactures all of those original style sidings. The windows on the front of the houses on a lot of the design are minimal. They're very private, and here's one that just has this is like our house. It has a little window it's the only window you can look out to the street, and above it though are clerestory windows to let in light, and most of the windows are in the back, and they're large floor-to-ceiling picture windows and sliding glass doors. Our house has like 4 sliding glass doors, 1 off every room.
The garage doors. This is a great example of the original garage doors. One of the problems, and what they do is they're like a barnyard door. I guess they slide back and forth. So one of the challenges now is that the garage doors do fail. Also, these things are heavy and they're hard to pull open and close. Mm-hmm. Ours are original, and we do have problems with them. So a lot of people have replaced them with standard garage doors that lift. So one thing is to encourage people when they are replacing with garage doors is to make them as simple as possible. Of course, this is ideal, but again, cost prohibitive because of the cost of the wood, the siding.
Hopefully keep the same body color of the house.
Mm-hmm.
They also used a similar look for the fencing that was between the homes on the front and also in the backyards. It's simulating the siding, but it's actually lumber that's grooved the same way, and so when you put them together, it simulates. You get the same consistent look. Here's a house that they've replicated an original style fencing. In this case, they're using the siding, which is one way to do it, but it looks pretty good. So for the exterior colors of all the original houses, you can see that they used a lot of earth tones, and the homes were originally stained rather than painted. But over the years, as people have maintained their homes, Most of them have been painted. There's a couple in the neighborhood that still have the original stain.
So here's another example of a really soft palette. Okay, so these are the accent colors, and this is where people could go wild with accent. You can paint your doors orange. A lot of people in the neighborhood, I noticed that the above the garage door, there's a beam, and they will paint that beam only, such as the white one, but they'll paint it one of these accent colors, and it looks very good. So this is where people were allowed to be somewhat creative with color.
The driveways in the 50s were pretty simple, just plain gray concrete, and that's what Eichler used, as opposed to these days you can do stamped, you can do pavers, and I think simple is usually looks good to me.
Here's another example, very simple, goes well with the house.
It's probably the original paving.
Okay, so landscaping. The original concept with front yard landscaping was to use plants that had a low profile, and so the house was visible from the street. The other landscape feature was to not have a fence between the front of the house towards the street, separating the lots so that you had a continuous park-like view. What's nice now is that so many of the homes in the neighborhood, not just Eichler's, but others as well, are going to the drought-tolerant landscaping. A lot of them are removing lawns and replacing them with this type of landscaping, which I think is quite appropriate. And here's another.
So cinder block walls were used it gives a different texture, a break from the vertical siding on a lot of the Eichlers. And that wall also doubles as an interior wall in most cases, where you can, here's another example, exterior cinder block wall. So in a lot of cases, like in our house, this isn't our house, but the cinder block wall is the other wall in what's called the multi-purpose room. They also use the cinder blocks in some of the models for the chimneys, for the fireplaces.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the interior characteristics. So the floor to ceiling plate glass windows are probably one of the defining characteristics of the Eichlers, but until you get into somebody's backyard, you never really see them. This shows an excellent example of that with multiple sliding glass doors which connect to the rear yard. This kitchen, I like this photo because it's 3 examples of character defining features. You can see the tongue and groove redwood ceilings. In this case, they've been painted white. You can also see where the large ceiling beams extend outside the front wall and are part of the overhang in front of the house. And also the Zolatone kitchen and bath cabinets that were used. And Dane will tell you a little bit about his experience with Zolatone.
So when I bought my house, my cabinets has all been painted white, and I did some research and I found that they had used this Zolatone paint, and they also used it for the sliding doors in the closets. And I think the dirty little secret is the cabinets themselves, they're really cheap plywood cabinets. And the Zolatone paint, it goes on, when you spray it on, it almost goes on like cottage cheese, and then it flattens out. Well, it will cover all of the sins of the cheap cabinet work, the cracks and everything. So, and then they promoted it as plastic coated cabinets, are easy to keep clean by scrubbing. So the Zolatone paint, it's speckly and it comes out of a spray gun, and it's really nasty stuff. I mean, I practically had to move out of the house for 2 days after I sprayed my cabinets. They also used a lot of mostly Philippine mahogany paneling on the interior walls, with the exception where they would extend the groove siding And most of the time, the Philippine mahogany was this dark oiled paneling, but they also did another version that we have, which is, it's like a light pickled opaque stain that's a little lighter. And then Eichlers are also, when people walk into an Eichler, the first thing they notice is this open floor plan. It's got this really airy feel because it doesn't have to have support walls. It's post and beam construction, which means you've got these vertical posts that support those beams, and that's supporting the whole roof. Once you have that, you can do anything you want with the interior space. So the kitchens, Eichlers were very early homes where they would have the kitchens open to the living area and for entertaining, which was a pretty unique concept at the time.
Okay, so I'm going to give you now the update on the proposed historic district. The first illustration you saw earlier with Sean's presentation, and what it shows, this is the boundaries of the proposed historic district. It runs from Southland Park Drive, Fordham Way, and Oak Ridge Way. Those are the three streets. And it's bordered primarily between 13th Street and 47th Avenue. There is a small leg to the north of 47th Street that you can see here that also does include Eichlers. There were no Eichlers built in that gap. So that was, they just never sold those lots. So one thing I want to point out that is sort of interesting, that I find interesting anyway, is that it's a very compact district. There really isn't, you know, there isn't much to it except for this little leg. But also the pink squares are the non-contributors, and there are very few non-contributors as opposed to the total number of contributing homes. So that is something I think that's important to point out. Okay, so the idea for the Eichler Historic District in Sacramento did not start with Eichler residents. It started with the city of Sacramento and its mid-century modern context and survey. And Sean explained this earlier, and he did mention that there were 5 key properties that the city identified that they wanted to include in the Sacramento Register of Historic and Cultural Resources. And Southland Park Hills, unit number 7, was one of these properties. And it's the only one that is not yet on the register. So the first step is to convince Eichler residents that it's a good idea to live in an historic district. In February 2020, Eichler property owners were invited to a community meeting conducted by the city's preservation director to discuss the proposed historic district. 23 households were represented and 32 people attended. It was decided that there's enough interest to move forward. However, the movement forward has been slow but steady. In August, a design guidelines working group of 6 Eichler property owners began working with Carson and Sean to develop some design standards. And our first task was to identify key architectural defining features. And I'm happy to see that our work and some of the photos taken by the group were included in the earlier presentation. So right now the city is finalizing the first draft of the design standards and preparing the nomination. After that, the working group's going to have an opportunity to review and comment. What has been a big challenge, I think, is to keeping the Eichler neighbors interested in the project. The opportunities for group activities just about disappeared in the last year and a half. But things are looking up, and we are looking forward to getting back to neighborhood gatherings and promoting the district. So that's it now.
So is that it for Eichlers?
So the next one is that we just wanted to, this is the end of the presentation, but there's one thing that we wanted to throw in at the end for fun. Dane and I recently visited Palm Springs. We were there for a day, and we went to the tourist center and began talking about mid-century and modern homes with this one person that worked there. And he told us that there are some new Eichlers built in Palm Springs. And of course, Dane was polite and didn't argue with him that they are not building any new Eichlers.
So those can't be real Eichlers.
Yeah, so, but we took a map. What we found out from him was that,
surprise.
yeah, and next slide. So KUD Properties has an agreement with Modern Home Realty in Menlo Park to use original plans licensed from the UC Berkeley Environmental Design Archives. And so we tracked them down. So we're just going to show you the photos. These 5 homes are clumped in one along just together in a contiguous line. And then there are some others that are scattered. So
what do you think?
And we're not going to talk about these. We're not going to voice our opinions. We want something for you to think about, something for you to consider. And if you want some other information about this, if you search on new Eichlers in Palm Springs, there will be websites will pop up and you can see interiors of these. Also, there's a connection with Dr. Scholl of Dr. Scholl's Foot Care, and you can read about that connection as well. So we just want to leave you with a little food for thought, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. We do have a few questions.
Okay.
One thing, just looking at those new Eichlers, one of the things that it sounds like we're probably going to have a continuing discussion with the Preservation Office about is the current sort of overall idea about replication of historic buildings, where it doesn't actually violate the Secretary of the Interior standards, but the current set of guidelines discourages use recreation of historic styles, and a new Eichler is effectively a replication of a historic building. And some cities are looser about that. I know Palm Springs very much so, but the upcoming rules regarding SB 35 infill actually prohibits use of historic styles, not just replication of historic buildings, but use of historic styles at all. So that's one of the things that we, like I said, that advocacy and arguing with the city on what's appropriate or not. That's a discussion we'll need to have. And when you first mentioned the new Eichlers, the other thing that came to mind is that Palm Springs is also getting ready to build a new 50-unit affordable housing complex that is not a replication of a historic building, but it's designed in mid-century style. So it's good to see that essentially there are architects and designers who are thinking about new construction and being inspired by historic styles, of which the Eichler is a particular example of mid-century architecture. The couple of questions we had, one from Vicky Valine, is what years were the Eichler homes built?
They were built primarily in 1954 and 1955 in Sacramento.
Okay, and then we had a question from Alan LaFaso. Do you have any thoughts about Sacramento Eichler renovations versus Bay Area renovations?
Oh, I imagine, we probably have the same problems and challenges and good taste and bad taste that they have in the Bay Area. As far as exterior or interior renovations, I think, it's probably for both. We're trying to, it's all about education. The more people know about how they should look or they originally look, I think we're hoping that people are more compelled then to be careful about how they renovate.
Okay, and then Mary Ellen Burns had her hand up. I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say too that some of the things, like for example, atriums, we won't find those in Sacramento. And there's a lot of features in, individual features that just wouldn't apply for renovation that they do in the Bay Area that wouldn't apply here. And I think that one of the challenges in renovation too is going to be trying to, there's a lot of windows in the back. And so keeping the heating and cooling under, costs and use under control is something else to consider that they don't have to consider in the Bay Area. So there's just differences, and it's, some things are going to be the same and other things very different.
Yeah, we have all of our original windows. It's just single pane plate glass, and but in order to replace those, depending on who you talk to, you might be, in violation of the code if you're going to go with dual pane. I've heard that you can't have them go all the way down to the floor. They have to be up 1 or 2 feet, which for me just totally destroys the look of the aesthetic of the windows in an Eichler. So I wouldn't do that.
Which brings into another thing about being in a historic district and being able to use a different code. That's a selling point. So.
And John Marshak, I see, wants to know if some of the Eichlers were built with carports instead of garages. In Sacramento, they all had garages, with the possible exception of one, which was a sales office, and the garage was the sales office. And I think they just added a carport off to the side on that one. And then I see where.
Yeah. And I know Mary Ellen Burns had her hand up earlier. Mary Ellen, if you still had a question, you want to put your hand back up, we could answer it live, but I'll let Dane answer Moko's question first.
And then there was another question about the biggest difference between Strang Brothers homes. Strang came later. It's kind of interesting. Strang Brothers were building more conventional type tract homes, and I don't know if they were working with Carter Sparks at the time, who was a very prominent mid-century modern architect in town, but they said, we want to build something that's more contemporary. What, can you help us? And he asked them if they were familiar with Eichlers, and they said, no, we're not. So I think the story is he drove them down to the Bay Area. They looked at the Eichlers, and they said, great, we want to build these. And he said, well, wait, I'm not going to. You can't build these. I'm not going to just do an out-and-out copy of them, but I'll design something similar. So there are some similarities between the two.
Okay, well, terrific. Thank you so much for the update and the stories and the information.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Is Mary Ellen?
Did Mary Ellen have a question?
No, I don't see her. See her hand up, and I don't see a question from her. But if I find out, I'll get you in touch directly later.
Okay.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're almost to the end of our program. I just wanted to say thanks for Sean deCourcy, and thank you so much to outgoing Preservation Director Carson Anderson for all his work. I met him first when we did basically a march of 50 punks, young and old, into a Preservation Commission meeting to advocate for protection of the 3 historic buildings on 21st Street, which, as you know from what you heard earlier, we're still working on. Thanks also to Martin Rubalcaba and also to John Vignoki, whose name I slightly slaughtered earlier, but thanks both for your presentation, and good luck with the project. And to Stephen Ropp from Repurposed Salvage and John Haeber from CPF. And we want to finish off we're talking about our historic home tour. And obviously, we didn't do one at all last year. Things kind of went way more sideways than we thought. And even though things are starting to reopen, a home tour takes a long time to prepare. And we're already in the planning phases for a virtual tour. So I wanted to share with you all a video by a member of our board and photographer extraordinaire, I guess is maybe the best way to put it, is Don Cox, who's also a member of the board. And I'll just let his video speak for itself. But let me know if you can hear it.
We can't hear it, Bill.
All right. Let me try that again. This time with sound.
This year's Preservation Sacramento Home Tour will be a virtual tour featuring a wide range of historic styles. You will be able to enjoy the history, elegance, and details of homes on tour without ever having to leave the comfort of your own home. Parking will not be a problem. The tour will kick off in mid-June with a members-only tour of the Cranston Geary Bramson House in Boulevard Park. This 1909 house is a must-see adventure for anyone with an interest in fascinating interiors and historic architecture. Designed by prominent Sacramento architects Sellon and Hemmings, this home is a reflection of the people who lived in it, from longtime owners, the Cranstons, to the Gearys, and followed by a loving restoration by George Bramson. Another house that will be featured on the tour will be a collaboration between SacMod and Preservation Sacramento, featuring a mid-century modern home of Dane and Susan Haynes. They will also describe their efforts to create a historic district in Southland Park Hills, a 1955 neighborhood of homes designed by Jones and Emmons and built by Joseph Eichler. Eichler was able to mass-produce affordable, practical homes that had the feel of a custom-designed house with large open spaces and indoor-outdoor living. This year's tour promises to be one of the most interesting and eclectic tours we have organized. We will keep you posted. Stay tuned for more updates and information.
Thank you to Don for producing that video. And thanks to each of you for attending today, and hopefully you'll join if you're not a member, or remain members if you are, because the members only tour will be, as the name implies, members only. It's not about jackets, but we will send out word as soon as the date and other information about that happens, and then we'll keep you informed for the actual home tour and how to participate in that. My name is William Burg, president of the board of directors of Preservation Sacramento, and we'll see you again at our next Preservation Roundtable in August.